Welcome to another episode of the Sports Sentiment. I am your host, Nick Urias, and we are back once again talking college basketball. It's mid-December, folks, which means it is time for conference play, one of the more wonderful times of the sports calendar, if you ask me. I mean, college basketball, once when you get into the conference schedules with these terrific head coaches, the great players that we've seen kind of flourish in their new places on this 10 to 11 game sample size that we have on these Mountain West teams. And when they go into these crazy home court environments and they really kind of showcase their skill sets, you got a close game with 5 minutes to go and a one possession game. That's as good as it gets. When you got a laundry list of games going on a college basketball Saturday, when you have some of those crazy Mountain West games that are just so tactical and every possession matters, there's nothing that can beat that. And we've had tons of those games over the years. I expect, heck, maybe a couple of those games tomorrow. We'll certainly dive into that slate. But I just wanted to come on here now with everybody kind of getting their non-conference portion of their schedule kind of wrapped up now. Just kind of want to give my thoughts on what we've seen thus far amongst every team. I've gotten more eyes on more teams than others. There's certainly been some surprises along the way. We kind of talked on this podcast about maybe 6 weeks ago, maybe less than that, probably a month ago, roughly, maybe like right before the Feast Week tournaments, on just our expectations going forward. When we had like a 4 or 5 game sample size on these teams, but now that we have a 10 to 11, some of my opinions have changed. A lot of them haven't, the jury's still out on some of these teams, if you ask me. We'll certainly dive into that. But I have to say, for the Mountain West, just overall as a conference, did not get off to the best start. We addressed that. I feel like everybody, whoever you follow beyond me on the college basketball, online space, would tell you the same exact thing. But they really did a good job at redeeming themselves. I would say starting Thanksgiving week and going forward. They avoided a lot of bad losses. Probably the one bad loss that they did take from Feast Week to, mid-December was probably UNLV's loss to Tennessee State on a neutral. But outside of that, it was pretty clean. The league took care of business, and they scored some big wins in the process, which they needed to redeem themselves for how putrid the start was, the first month of the year in November, right? Because we were looking at it, and, when Boise State's taking the D2 loss and UNLV, it's kind of this Jekyll and Hyde team, and, Colorado State loses to the Denver Pioneers, and New Mexico suffers the rivalry loss, which, won't do any good metric wise, but anybody that just understands just the rivalry aspect of, college basketball and, college athletics understands those are tougher games than what, everybody makes them out to be. But the league did a really good job of scoring some big wins in some true road environments on the neutrals. And they really, ultimately soften the blow from what was a brutal November. So kudos to that squad, to all those squads. And, they needed it, because if the Mountain West wants to be a multi-bid league, which I think is in the trajectory of doing so, obviously, I think right now you're probably looking at 3-4 bids in the Mountain West right now. And again, we're going to see how this all materializes here with conference play. I think they did a much better job the past couple weeks, in just boosting the resume for the league as a whole. Because when you look at the ACC, the SEC is most certainly down compared to what they were last year, but the ACC's back up. I would say the Missouri Valley's done themselves some really good things. That's a deep conference this year, with Illinois State and Belmont and Bradley and, a bunch of other teams that have kind of blossomed. I think the American has been much better than what probably people expected, with obviously Penny Hardaway in Memphis and South Florida and Bryce Hodgson, but also this Tulsa team that played San Jose State on Thanksgiving week has kind of blossomed into something with Eric Conkle out of nowhere. So the American's much deeper. Missouri Valley is probably you know, there was a lot of praise for that mid-major conference in the preseason, but I feel like it's even better than what people expected. So, that's what the Mountain West is dealing right now, beyond just the Power Fours, of course, right? So, that's what everyone's kind of jockeying for position. Everyone's looking at these Ken numbers and stuff like that, but we're gonna see how this all plays out. We're gonna see if the Utah States, the Colorado States, the usual suspects, what ultimately happens down the stretch here, and how they continue to bolster their resume going forward here. But we're gonna go down the list here real quick. We're not This podcast won't be too long on a Friday evening. But just wanted to rattle off some things, and just my general thoughts, and kind of just set the stage on the resumes, as well as preview tomorrow's, as in Saturday, Friday, December 20th, Mountain West action that we have on tap. So to me, the best team, I would say, in the Mountain West right now, sure, from a metric standpoint, but from the eye test, has to be Utah State. When you have wins against Tulane and Davidson, and by 20 plus, and blasting Davidson by 38, you win at Charlotte by 26, who really isn't any good, but then you come back home and take care of a really good Illinois State team, who's projected to be a top 3 team in the Missouri Valley. That was a quad 2 win for Utah State against the Redbirds, taking care of them by 5. The one loss that they had was at South Florida, which I thought that was the game that they were going to slip up, if there was going to be a slip-up spot for the Aggies. South Florida is a high-octane group. They got, tons of dudes that could just score at will. Bryce Hodgson, who I mentioned earlier, the new South Florida coach, he was at Arkansas State last year. He had them at play. He had that Red Wolves team as a player in the Sun Belt, and he's also a Nate Oates guy. Nate Oates has got tons of these dudes now where, his former assistants go on to be head coaches, and they pretty much play the same philosophy and, offensive, I guess, pace and action as, that Alabama Crimson Tide team does, where, it's a lot of inside layups or threes. They don't really take mid-range jumpers. So you're starting to see, the game kind of evolve a little bit, and everyone's kind of starting to take Nate Oates, especially his guys that get these new gigs at these mid majors. They kind of, take over and, kind of develop the same way that Alabama's been running things. But, that's a buzz on South Florida. And, the fact that that game was, in Tampa, Florida, I mean, that's a really tough game. So honestly, you lose that game by 13. That game was a whole lot worse than what it was for Utah State. But MJ Collins averaging 20 points per game. He had a 40-point game. What was it in the game versus Davidson? That was a Charleston Classic record. Gary Clark's been awesome. He's been starting and then coming off the bench. Utah State's been kind of, moving things a little bit, especially when they kind of hit a rough patch. And, they had a 3-point win, an overtime win versus Montana State, and then they dropped that South Florida game. Jared Calhoun kind of switched up the starting lineup in that game at Charlotte, and we saw Adlin Alamine, who was a freshman, front court piece. He kind of got some, a little bit more action. And, this thing with Utah State is, their depth, very similar to last year's team. So, the minutes are going to fluctuate, and it's going to be dependent on the matchup, right? Because Drake Allen was a guy that was coming off the bench for them last year, and you're starting to see with no Dayton Albury and Dexter Acano and, one less guard as well that I think graduated as well with Ian Martinez. Drake Allen is all of a sudden the guy now. So I wouldn't be shocked, like we saw Perryman versus in the VCU game, the one that was in San Antonio and midway through November. We saw him get a whole lot more action, especially with Drake Allen getting injured. So, Utah State is going to have this, very nice luxury of playing guys in certain spots that kind of will be able to benefit based on the matchup. And, you never know. There's going to be probably a game versus Boise State this year where they might close with a different lineup from when they play Colorado State. Who knows? We're going to see how that plays out. That's why we watch the games, and, we're going to come here on this podcast and kind of break it all down. But, I have to say, Utah State, with that matchup zone, and we've talked about this during the preseason, that matchup zone against those non-conference teams, you could game plan for it all you want on film, but until you have to go deal with it and, they're trapping the corners and making the right double teams and, just having the active hands across the board, they are a tough team to score on. And, in the fast break, they really don't screw things up either when they first force those turnovers. So, Utah State's going to be, a buzzsaw at home once again. And, we'll get into their matchup here a little bit later against Colorado State, but that is one hell of a game, to start out the Mountain West slate on Friday, December 20th. But they look good. Their resume looks good. The South Florida game, no shame in that loss. Honestly, think the South Florida loss is going to just age even better as the season goes on, which is ultimately why you play those non-conference games against kind of those high-quality mid-majors if you could schedule them, right? Because, the VCU win, the Illinois State win, the South Florida loss probably won't, it's not going to be detrimental. So look, Utah State's going to be just fine. I think they're going to be fighting for an at-large, or I shouldn't say fighting, as long as they don't kind of take one of those silly losses, which they really haven't over the years. Jared Calhoun didn't take it last year. Even Danny Sprinkle 2 years ago didn't even really take a bad loss in the conference portion of the schedule. So we'll see how it plays out. But, if they take care of business along the way and score, a few big road wins that maybe they steal like they did last year at San Diego State, they're going to be firmly in line for an at-large. It's just they got to find a way maybe to get out of that 8-9 line how they did last year. Or, that 7-10 and, they're drawing UCLA and it's just a bad matchup for them. They can get a little bit higher. We'll see how that goes. There's a lot of good teams out there, especially in the Power 4 level. Something to monitor for sure. I know all the bracketologists will be doing that, and we'll be getting one on next week on the podcast just to attack the sport as a whole. Now that we're heading into the conference portion of the schedule, shout out to our guy, Rocco Miller. He'll be coming on the pod next week to address, just the sport and, all the different conferences and where they're kind of jockeying from a metric and number standpoint, across the board here, because March will be here before you know it. But the Aggies look good, and going into another team with the Colorado State Rams, who look like a factory themselves. So they suffered back-to-back losses versus Denver and Virginia Tech around Thanksgiving time frame, and they've really looked good ever since. They beat Wichita State by 6, who a common opponent with Boise State. Wichita's definitely, that program's been down. It's definitely not what it was like when they had Fred VanVleet and all those other dudes, but it's still a program that is going to still be good this year, I feel like. So you beat Wichita by 6. You beat the South Florida team that Utah State lost to by 15. And then you beat Colorado in the Rocky Mountain Showdown, which that game being in Fort Collins definitely helps. But that was a game where, rivalry games are always good for the game, but it's even better when you kind of get a close game in the rivalry matchup and you find a way to close it out, right? I'm a big believer in, not only, I guess scheduling aggressively, but scheduling against some good mid-majors. When you score those wins, it helps you, not only with your resume, but just you as players and coaches kind of learn from your mistakes. And, that Colorado game, CSU learned a lot about themselves. The fact that Kyle Jorgensen can hit a big 3 for you and, have an and one, shot late, in the final 2 minutes of that one. Josh Pasquarelli's shown that he could be kind of this dude where he's a 3-level scorer. He's easy to play with. He could kind of get you a bucket in clutch time, anytime you really need it. Pasquarelli from Marist, who we were extremely high on from the Red Foxes last year, and, his transition, he is shooting 52% from 3 on 74 attempts. Just put that in perspective. You could do the math in your head. 74 attempts in 11 games. That's like 6 to 7 threes a game here. So that's pretty wild. The fact that he is just shooting the hell out of the basketball right now. Um, Pasquarelli's an animal. He's a shooter. And, like I said, just a guy that is going to make the right play as well. And, you know, Colorado State, I mean, this is just a nasty formula that they got going on right now. 16th in offensive rating, but 362nd in pace in the country. And that's a dangerous formula because when you're playing at a snail's pace and hitting all your shots, that's why they're winning all these games by 20, right? Because there's only so many possessions in the game. Let's just say there's like 60 possessions between both teams in the game. There's probably a little bit more than that. But let's just say there's like 60, we'll call it 67 possessions between both teams in the game. If they're, 16th in offensive rating, I mean, they got to be north of 50%. That means they're, producing on half the possessions that they're gaining on. It's just an insane formula that translates to winning. We'll see if that materializes in Mountain West play. We'll see, if they if a team like, Boise State, or I should say more so like Utah State, tomorrow on Saturday can really speed them up. Because that's what I'm looking forward to. They're playing at this extremely slow pace. Can an up-tempo team, like a San Jose State, for example, can a team like that, go toe-to-toe with them? Wyoming's playing much faster this year. That's what I'm looking for the Colorado State team when, when they're on the road and, things are a little bit whacked out and they're down 10, and we saw that a little bit versus Virginia Tech where they kind of had a fight a little bit, but I want to see it against these Mountain West teams because these Mountain West teams know Ali Farouk Manesh and they got 11 games on tape on him. Like Tim Miles knows his tendencies, right? So that's what I'm excited to see for Colorado State. Can they keep this up? Jevin Muniz, the Florida Gulf Coast transfer, has been really good for this team. 5 assists per game. That's first in the Mountain West. Rashawn Bemba has only played 2 games for Colorado State. He was kind of the guy. I mean, he was at media day. Usually when these guys are at media day, it's like, okay, we're expecting a role for you. He's only played 2 games. It's only because of injury, right? But Kyle Jorgensen, I think, is much more than everybody anticipated. He's averaging 15 a game on 65% shooting, 52% from 3 himself on 31 attempts, and 85% from the line. They're probably obviously he's going to start every game as long as he's healthy. But with this Kerry Booth kid and Rashawn Bemba, how do the minutes get split? I'm interested to see that when Bemba kind of gets back fully with his legs under him from that injury of his. And just to see how all the pieces mesh. Rex Steiner's been good. I know the shooting has been, he's a shooter and they got tons of these guys. But to me, it's amazing that Colorado State, we kind of doubt them every single year, yet they come back, they reload, they find the right pieces in the portal. You can tell they play with each other. And this was a team that kind of really hit the ground running on opening night versus Incarnate Word. So Colorado State's definitely been impressive. They've probably been the most surprising team to me, just because of, not only because of their record, but just how they're drilling teams and how they're doing it. That was something I wasn't expecting, from this team. I was expecting, honestly, from them in like the middle ground, but they're showing, that they're going to be able to compete with the San Diego States, the Utah States, at least early on here, through this 11-game sample size. We'll see how this translates on the road and how teams kind of game plan for them later on. Transitioning into another 9-2 team, the New Mexico Lobos. Lobos resume. So their 2 losses at New Mexico State, true road game in Las Cruces by 8, in Nebraska by 12. To me, the Lobos so obviously it's a different team this year with Eric Olin, and they've kind of flipped this role, especially early on when they were playing the UT Arlingtons and the New Mexico States and, those, bye games early in November. It's like, oh boy, they're going to be playing 58-50, and it's going to be very low scoring and very much defense first implemented type team. they've been kind of, just kind of going nuts here, offensively. The past, I would say 2.5 weeks now, probably actually, I could even go back to, maybe that Mississippi State game where they kind of just were kind of going and, kind of putting the ball in the basket a whole lot more than I anticipated. And so the Nebraska game, they lost by 12. That was maybe a week before Thanksgiving or right around it. That was one of the earlier tournaments in Kansas City. But to me, I thought that was the turning point for them as far as kind of unlocking their team. Because I think we all knew that Dayton Albury was going to be just amazing for this team. He was going to have the ball in his hands. He was going to fill up the stat sheet and he was going to make winning plays for this team. But when the leader of this team, slaps the dude on Nebraska, gets the flagrant 2, gets ejected, and then you kind of, he's gone. You got to figure this thing out. And they were already getting killed in that Nebraska game. And then they kind of make this second half rally from all these freshmen, the Uriah Tenets, the Tomislav Boyans, right? Just these young guys that probably needed the ball a little bit more, probably needed a few more opportunities and a few more ball touches. And, Jake Hall, another guy. And they all three of those guys just came out and kind of really put a really good second half together against Nebraska. Despite it being a 12-point loss, they cut it to like 1 or 2 possessions with about 4 minutes to go, and then the wheels fell off. That translated into that 2-point win versus Mississippi State, which is a very close game from start to finish. Dayton Albury didn't play the first half. He came off the bench in the second half. And I think that's only kind of worked to the Lobos' advantage. And I think that's what contributed to a win at VCU, which was a return game from last year. The Lobos and Richard Pitino hosted the VCU Rams, and they won by double digits. But that was a game for me that I had as a scheduled loss for the Lobos. So the fact that you went on and won that game on the road at the Siegel Center, where that place gets absolutely lit in that Atlantic 10 atmosphere, kudos to the Lobos there. That Santa Clara win with beating the Broncos by 27, that's going to be a game that just ages like fine wine for this team, especially not only getting the win, but with the margin as well. I think it's massive. But I really like those freshmen right now. I mean, Jake Hall, this guy had 25 points, I believe, at VCU, and he just went bonkers from 3 in that second half. Is there going to be an extra gear for Dayton Albury in the conference play? I would imagine so. I'm interested to see how Eric Olin kind of plays these possessions. Chris Howell, I think, is going to only get better, right? Because, he's kind of working with the new team this year as well. He's a defensive first guy. I think you're going to really see his value in conference play. Just how you kind of see Boise State's RJ Keene, in these conference games, kind of make the right pass, the hockey assist, of course, the pass to assist. You're gonna see, very impactful stuff from Chris Howell. That's not gonna showcase on the stat sheet, but poking the ball loose, deflections, making the right pass, on the fast breaks, right? Eric Olin loves that guy. And, Howell loves Eric Olin. So there's a reason why those guys, have been together. That's why Olin brought him to Albuquerque. And, I don't see New Mexico losing a lot of games at the pit. I know they got San Jose State on Saturday. That's going to be a tough game for the Spartans, no doubt. But interested to see how this new look Lobo team kind of materializes. Oh, and by the way, Tomislav Boyan, New Mexico, big man. From what I gathered, because I couldn't watch the game, their last game versus Florida Gulf Coast, had an injury. We'll see how healthy he is versus San Jose State on Saturday. But this is a guy that's second in the Mountain West in rebounds per game with over 9, just behind Nana Owusu-Onane for Grand Canyon. So interested to see how the Lobos kind of work things out with that, if it is even an issue. And, just how they look at the pit on Saturday versus the Spartans. And, once when they hit the road for their first true road game in conference play, how that team looks there. Let's go to Sundance Wicks and the Wyoming Cowboys. This is a team that Now, don't get me wrong. A lot of people are excited about him. Coach Wicks, I think, was excited about his team this year. But this is a team that I'm still a little bit skeptical on with that 9-2 record because 8 of those 11 games were at home in Laramie. And I know that place doesn't get lit as much as it used to. But that was you know, I'm still a little bit skeptical on it, especially when I see, the body of work. Wins versus Fullerton, Austin P, the Portland Pilots, Norfolk State, Denver Pioneers, Dartmouth from the Ivy League, the South Dakota Coyotes, and then the South Dakota State team, which was probably their best win on their resume. And I'm not sure if South Dakota State is, they'll be a player in the Summit League, but I'm not sure if they win it. Their losses at Sam Houston, that was their first true road game of the year. I thought that was one that they were going to slip up in. And then, Texas Tech only losing that game by 2 possessions might be one of their better data points of the non-conference, as stupid as that sounds. But Texas Tech, that was the Jeff Linder Bowl. That game kind of means a little bit more, for both sides. And Wyoming really went in there. I think Leland Walker dropped 28 in that game. So, that's some really good signs. Speaking of Leland Walker, he's been terrific, averaging 14 points per game, 4 assists per game. Yeah, and they're both of his true road games, 28 and 24. So, Nasir Meyer, this is a guy that, kind of blossomed here the past, couple weeks here, winning a few Mountain West Freshmen of the Week. He's averaging 14 a game. They got some really good transfers, right? With Caden Bennett, Damarion Dennis, kind of just those filler pieces. They still have Magassa coming off the bench, who looks a year older, but he's still a little bit limited himself. But that's, that was a guy that was starting for them last year, but now gets to come off the bench, right? So I think the deal is that I think Wyoming, they're going to be a tough out in Laramie, which I felt like last year in year one with Sundance, they were vulnerable, or there were games where it's like, okay, the game's in Laramie, but you can't really value the home court as much as you maybe a couple of years ago when they were, when they were humming with Hunter Maldonado, when they were, really good under Jeff Linder. I feel like we're going to start to kind of get back to that area this year where I don't know if the home crowd's there, but they're going to play much better at home. I mean, they barely cleared over 500 at home last year. I'd expect the home record to be a whole lot better. I'd also expect them to win a few more road games than they did last year because their road games in Mountain West play were not good. And I'd expect them to win a few more this year. So I like the Wyoming team a little bit more this year, but I'm not ready. You can't really crown them as a contender just yet. I think we got to see them against, some better teams right now. Because that non-conference, similar to Fresno State, who we'll get into, really not too much there. And, a lot of those games were in Laradice, but still, they've taken care of business. And, that's all you can really do, right? I mean, the games that they won, that they should have won, they won. They don't have the bad loss yet. So we can't really penalize them for anything. I'm just saying, I'd say pump the brakes on the Pokes for right now. As far as, this serious team. And I don't know if people are taking them, ultimately like as a serious contender or, in that top tier. Maybe they're in the tier 2, which I would say for me is an improvement for this team because I thought they were going to maybe be floating in the San Jose State, maybe territory again, like how they were last year, maybe a little bit better. But man, this looks like a team that might be, I don't know, maybe like 4 league wins better, which is obviously significant when you have, all of these teams, jockeying for position. And there's like, 2 games separating 6 teams, how it was last year. So it might not seem like a lot, but it is. And I think that Wyoming team is most certainly better than it was last year. Sundance Wicks, I was at his presser at Mountain West tournament last year when they lost to San Jose State. And he's like, we got to go get some dogs. We just have to. And, he called out his team a bunch last year and how they really just didn't have that hunger. And he's like, hey, if you're in Laramie, Wyoming, like this place is not for everybody. And I think he's kind of got a team that's a little bit more hungry and a group that, is a little bit more bought in, to what they're doing. And that's why you go get a guy like Leland Walker, who was pissed off in Boca Raton in his role. And you're like, hey, you know what? You were in that flashy Florida Atlantic team that had, a hell of a lot of talent, with the Voltikaitis kid and the Bob Millers, and they all got rated to power fours. You weren't happy with your role? Come play 7,000 feet above sea level, get acclimated to the altitude, and you could be a dog for us. And Leland Walker, 14 a game, 4 assists a game, some big time scoring outbursts against some really good teams, in their two losses in the non-conference. Um, that's a W for Sundance Wicks and his point guard. So we'll monitor this team as always as we do here. But they're most definitely in the surprising territory of the Mountain West right now that we most certainly have to circle and watch them on the road. Moving on to Boise State. Boise State. So look, they suffered the D2 Hawaii Pacific loss, and they've really hit the ground running ever since. Wins versus Utah Valley, Rio Grande Valley, Wichita State, Montana State, Duquesne, at Butler, and then against St. Mary's on a neutral, even though it was in Idaho Falls, which is a little bit northeast of, or a little bit north of Boise, but northeast Idaho. I have to say, like Boise, like them going to the Maui Invitational really helped them. I think they kind of got the demons out of the way on opening night. I think that was very humbling for them, right? When you lose to a D2 team at home, I mean, this is a team that's just not going to lose many games at home to begin with against Division One talent. I think that was the ultimate wake up call for this team, and they have really turned a corner since. And even those two losses in Maui, USC was a game that they probably should have won. I mean, it was a 1 to 2 possession game for 40 minutes. And, Javen Buchanan had a chance to win it, and it hit front iron on his three in Maui. And in the NC State loss with Will Wade and Darian Williams and, all those dudes, that's a really good Wolfpack team in the ACC. Those are going to be 2 quad 1 losses all year long, I feel like. So no shame in, the 2 losses that going to look on from a metric standpoint for Boise. I'm interested to see, and, this is probably going to be a conversation that we have in a week from now, with our bracketologist, but also, just going forward into March, because Boise State probably will be floating around the bubble territory as they always do. What does the Hawaii Pacific loss mean for the resume from the NCAA committee? I know Ken Palm doesn't really value it because, it only tracks D1 teams, but is there a penalty for the season opening loss? Interesting conversation to have, of course. And we'll see, how that plays out. But I have to say, and I said it in the preseason, like, this was, I feel like, going to be one of the better Leon Rice coaching jobs that he's had in his career. I really did, because, he's had Tyson Degenhart, Alvaro Cardenas. He's had a really good point guard over the years. Even, you can even, rewind to Marcus Shaver and, his son and Max Rice, right? And, he brought in Dylan Andrews from UCLA, kind of scuffled early. But this is a guy where it seems like he's got a little bit of he's figured out the offense a little bit more. Is kind of unlocking everybody's tendencies. Javen Buchanan's just a guy that is going to, when he gets into, that restricted area or that elbow area of the floor, you kind of know that he can just kind of back down his guy. And, that was very encouraging for me in the USC game that I watched from start to finish in the Maui Invitational, that he was able to go against, like the Chad Baker Mazzaras and the other, dude that towers over people for the Trojans, and really go down there and score. Andrew Meadow looks much better now compared to what he did in that Hawaii Pacific game. So, Boise, I feel like as a whole just looks good. Even like that AJ Nato, like, I don't know how many, times he comes, on off the bench and gives them like, hey, like you're coming into a game with, two possession game with 3 minutes left. I don't know how many of those spots that he's going to get in league play, but from what I saw in that USC game, he had some big shots for them. So I like I like the Boise depth a little bit more now than I did, a little over a month ago. Drew Fielder definitely looks a whole lot better. I mean, and I think that's goes hand in hand with our Dylan Andrews thing. Like, I think Andrews and Fielder have kind of just been working on things and, just been kind of going because Drew Fielder, I mean, he's leading the team in scoring now with 14 a game, and he's got 4 games this year with 20 plus, including, 22 points and 6 rebounds versus St. Mary's. And I have to say, when you punch St. Mary's in the mouth 12-0 early, I know that was a 1 possession game late, but Boise had the lead the entirety of the game, really controlled it against a St. Mary's team that's very slow, rebounds like really good rebounding team. When you could dictate the pace against St. Mary's and control the game versus the Gales and a Randy Bennett team, you've got your stuff figured out. So that's what impressed me with Boise. We're going to see how they look, obviously, in their conference game versus the Nevada Wolfpack. And speaking of the Wolfpack, here we go with Steve Alford's group, 8-3 on the year. They started out slow, right? I mean, they had the win versus Louisiana Tech, and I'm like, whoa, this looks pretty good. And a game that they probably should have lost versus Pacific. They beat UC Santa Barbara. They beat Southern Illinois in overtime. Like, they've had some close calls. But when you beat the San Francisco Dons in the Acrisure Classic, you beat Washington State, you beat UC San Diego, who's only lost a game this year, and that being to Nevada. You have the win versus Duquesne, and then your games are on the road at Santa Clara, at Washington, you lose, and you have the one clunker versus UC Davis, which was probably going to happen. You probably should have lost more than one of those games. So the fact that you lose one, I mean, it is what it is, but could have been a whole lot worse for Steve Alford's unit. But I've been really impressed with Nevada just because Corey Camper went out, their 3-and-D guy, who is obviously extremely valuable to their team this year. He started every game he's played. And the fact that Tayshawn Comer just goes off and, really takes over. Steve Alford and company have been fluctuating with this Chuck Bailey III and Tyler Rollison, minutes. One of them starts, one of them comes out the bench. I know they were starting them both once upon a time early on in the year. How does that work come conference play? Do we see some changes there depending on the matchup? Interested to see how that goes. I think for me, I want to see a little bit more of Elijah Price, and I've talked about this a bunch. I want tons of Elijah Price touches. And I think we are going to get it because I think the possessions are going to matter just so much more in league play, where I think Price in the post, it could have his way against these teams. And he's only a sophomore. Like, you got him here for a reason. Because Nevada, when I saw him in person at Santa Clara, and a lot of their shots were like, hey, we're very reliant on the three, and they're still like that. They're very reliant on the three, but a lot of their shots, like, they were getting high quality looks just from an offensive rebound. Like, their half court stuff was just a little bit broken. So I'm interested to just see this team, like, in a game at home in a high leverage Mountain West environment. That schedule to start out league play too is also brutal. Like, remember, they got a terrible draw, I would say, like, from the scheduling makers. And look, everybody plays each other, but I do think when you get, three brutal games to start and you lose all three, like how Nevada did last year, it can snowball your season. And we saw that with that team. Like, they started out 0-3, 0-4 in league play, and it all collapsed, right? Because I remember they hosted Colorado State, then they went to the Pit. They had some other really good team at home, and they lost it, right? So, like, you go 0-3, 0-4, and in this league, it's very tough to overcome, especially when you drop home games and then all of a sudden you have to go steal one on the road. So, you know, life can be difficult in that area. No doubt, but I'm interested to see uh just how Nevada looks going forward here, because I do think they're a team that can most certainly be dangerous. Speaking of a team that I thought was going to be dangerous, that but really hasn't been all too special thus far, has been the Grand Canyon Antelopes. So you look, we got the visual up now, youtube.com/@the-sports-sentiment. 6-4 overall, the Lopes have been. They had a tough game versus Oklahoma State on a neutral in Phoenix that they probably should have won. It was a close game late, but Steve Lutz's Cowboys team in the Big 12 has been very impressive this year. The Youngstown State loss, I think, is just going to sting and sting. Even though that is a quality team in the horizon, the metrics are not going to like that loss at all. Even though Grand Canyon's kind of taking care of business in some spots, especially at home, like a game versus Northern Illinois and Stetson and Purdue Fort Wayne. The season opener, I would say, was probably pretty impressive for them, but from the few times that I've caught them, it just hasn't really looked that impressive. And that's the danger of these portal teams, right? When you bring in Henley from UNLV and Stromer from Gonzaga and Brian Moore from Norfolk, and when you only have two returners and they're deeper reserves, how does this kind of whole thing materialize, right? So I'm interested to see that, of course. Do they turn a corner? How do they manage the Brian Moore minutes? Because that was a guy that was, he won like the mid-major player of the year award last year at Norfolk. You got to think the transition from the MEAC to the Mountain West, because in the MEAC, when you get into league play, when you're playing the Delaware States and the Maryland Eastern Shores, those are bottom of the barrel teams in the country. And it's just a massive step up a class when you're playing, some quality teams, some quality mid-majors, in your non-conference. And then when you step up against a team like Oklahoma State, now you're going to go through this Mountain West gauntlet. What does that look like? And, even I think it's also maybe a learning experience for a guy like Bryce Drew. I know he's coached NCAA tournament games, but those teams in the WAC were just on a different level compared to what he's going to be going up against the Mountain West. Like outside of Utah Valley, that was a tough game for him every single year. Who's pretty well coached. Like they bring in a pipeline of coaches now, because a lot of those guys out there with the Wolverines, have gotten, opportunities elsewhere with coaching upgrades over the years. Mark Madsen, prime example, now is at Cal, but I'm interested to see how this whole thing, for Bryce Drew, against some quality coaches every single night, works in the Mountain West. I think they're going to be able to rally with these with their home court environment. And, that's the beauty of this thing where, you're going to get those games at home. It's just another crazy environment that all these teams got to go into. So I do think the home court will kind of will them to some wins. But on the road, I'm very excited to see them. Very excited. In that game versus Wyoming on Saturday, which that we'll look into here in a minute, is very it's one of the more fun games that I feel like we have on the slate. Every game is fun, but that one, from just the Wyoming perspective that we talked about earlier, throwing in with the GCU kind of struggles from, just based on the eye test to me. Interesting to see how both of those teams kind of put it together on the road, in the altitude. Very intrigued. I see why people are intrigued with Fresno State as well. And let's not get it twisted. Their non-conference was very soft. Very soft. And, some of their losses too, like they had a loss to Cal State Bakersfield and USC Upstate. And, Cal State Northridge, that Northridge game. They were down 20, took a late lead and with like 2 minutes to go. And then they got lost on a buzzer beater at the Horn on the road. They had the loss at Arkansas, kind of took care of business at the Save Mart Center. We all know that place doesn't get lit, just like San Jose State place, it doesn't get lit, along with, the Thomas and Mack and Air Force. So I'm interested to see Fresno in league play. I've talked about their guards with Hyde Breeder and Zayon Collins. Those are two adults. Those are two adults that they have. Hyde Breeder's a really good shooter. Is a little bit more soft spoken, but uh, you know, that's a guy that can most certainly, speak up and that has, college experience. When you got a guy like Zayon Collins who just knows angles, knows how to get to the basket, knows how to make the right play. I think I talked about him a little bit like, hey, maybe I need him to, not be too unselfish. I think that's what I want to see from him a little bit more. Hey, if you got the angle to go take it to the rack and score, go do it instead of passing it out for a three. I talked about Jory, one of their other guards that round off that 3-guard lineup. I think he's a guy that's kind of hit some big shots for them. I think it was that Utah Valley game late in that one. He had a big 3 on the wing to kind of put Fresno State on top in that game. That was a really good win for Fresno there at the Save Mart Center. And DJ Stickman off the bench, just a pure energy guy that I think can impact this team this year in Mountain West play where, he comes off the bench. He's filled with energy. I think when things kind of get squirrely early on the road, I feel like a guy like Stickman, when Fresno is at Utah State or they're at Boise and, they kind of get punched in the mouth and they're down on 12-2 and like in 3 minutes in, wouldn't be shocked if Stickman comes in and gives that team a jolt. Interested to see how the Wilson Jack and Jack Manny, front court kind of work. I know they really don't play both of those guys together, but which one kind of gets a little bit more of the load here in conference play? Fresno's going to catch some teams at the Save Mart Center. Remember, they lost 4 or 5 overtime games last year, and it was just incredible. And a lot of those games were at the Save Mart Center in Fresno, California. So I'd expect the games for San Jose State and Fresno to be lit. I'd expect Wyoming to have a tough chance over there, Nevada to struggle over there, even a team like Boise or Colorado State to go in there and get all that they can handle. So very excited to see them. They're definitely be a tough out, especially in their own building. On the road, there's probably going to be some spots where they get drilled, of course, but I have to say, what Fresno State head coach really liked his team this year, and that was kind of, we're like, what? Shout out to our boy Kobe Dant. We were talking behind the scenes at Media Day. We were like, what? Like Fresno likes what they have, put together this year. And like you're seeing it, like the fact that team is 6-5 overall, and and put together a much better non-conference than what everybody anticipated with Vance Wahlberg and company. Kudos to them. I think they got to like what they've seen thus far, and they had a couple close games, like the Bakersfield game they should have won, at the legendary Selland Arena. And there was another one that they should have won as well that was really close for them as well, the USC Upstate one. That one's going to sting all year. But, Fresno definitely looks good, but of course, like anything, a little bit skeptical with that 6-5 record with the strength of opponent. Let's jump back up very quickly to San Diego State, 6-3 overall. I'm going to just say this about San Diego State very quickly because this is the preseason favorite, of course. This is going to be a very interesting team when they play at home because we have the 1-game sample with them versus Air Force, and they struggled in the first half. I think you're going to have a lot of those situations this year. I shouldn't say a lot, but you're going to have a few of them at home with San Diego State where they kind of play with their food a little bit for the first 15, 18 minutes of the game. And we saw that a ton in their non-conference as well, right? When they were playing Troy, the game was extremely close and they lost the game in double overtime. And, they didn't deserve to win the game. There was another non-conference game that's just that's blanking on me right now. The Long or not the Long Beach State game was a little bit close in the first half. I know they drilled them by 30, but I think that's the formula for San Diego State this year. When they're at home, there's going to be some spots where, the offense is just kind of slow out of the gate. Their defense is so damn good where it's going to keep them in it, and then the floodgates will open. Uh, it's going to be a different guy every night, I feel like, for this team. I'm still waiting for some Miles Bird consistency, and that was the big thing for Bird during the preseason, for Dutcher, for everybody. And that's why it was so good that Bird did not declare for the NBA draft to come back for another year to kind of learn from this. And, when you have Reese Waters back, it's going to kind of take off the workload a little bit. I'm interested, how Sean Newman kind of gets reinserted here. I know he had an injury, and I was shocked by the minutes that he was getting early on in the year. I thought he was going to be penciled in as a starter. BJ Davis right now is probably their best player. I know Guath has been injured. I think everyone understands the upside with Guath down the road, but through this 9-game sample size that they have, he looks like their best player. BJ Davis, he had 19 points in the Air Force win. So, they're going to be dependent on a lot of different guys this year. And that's what Dutcher talked about, with me in our one-on-one, during the preseason. Our team is going to be as good as how good, they want to play, as far as, as long as they don't complain about their minutes. This is what happens when you have a good team, because then a guy like LZ Harrington kind of comes out of nowhere, right? Like, this freshman is like, hey, you're starting. And, a guy like Sean Newman, who was at Louisiana Tech and playing 37 minutes a game, all of a sudden is a little shell-shocked. And this is the game. This is why the transfer portal could kind of be a little detrimental to your career as well, of course. Not that I'm saying that for Sean Newman, but that's the risk of jumping in the portal, right? So, we'll see how this plays out with San Diego State. They're still going to be a player in this league. They were all in on the players era, and they got drilled by Michigan by 40 in a game that they looked horrendous in. And then they, responded in a game versus Oregon, which I do think will age better for them, because I would have a whole lot of respect for Dana Altman when he has Jackson Stelstad and Nate Biddle. With that duo, and they have that TK Simpkins kid, the transfer from Elon. Yeah, that's going to be a team that only gets better as the season goes on. But they were all in on beating Michigan. That's a personal game for Dutcher, of course, and they kind of got exposed a little bit. They have the game on Saturday versus Arizona. Wow, that would be an incredible game. I'm very interested to see them if they can pull off that upset. Wow, that would do a whole lot for the league, a whole lot for them. And it'd be a confidence booster for all parties involved with San Diego State. So very intrigued to see them. A couple more teams. San Jose State 5-6 overall. This team just can't get healthy right now. Javon Hanna's the big one. Javon Hanna, the Western Michigan transfer. So Javon Hanna, terrific two-way player. We have the 1-game sample size with him when they played the season opener at Utah, but everyone's kind of waiting for him to kind of get back here. I think the timetable is in about a week or two. The problem is Ben Roseborough. You have one less guard now. Ben Roseborough is on a cast, and he's going to be out for an extended period of time. So Tim Miles' groups just can never get healthy. This was the issue last year, and everybody had the flu 2 years ago, even though their team wasn't good. So it's it's been a little bit unlucky here for the Spartans. But look, they played the brutal non-conference schedule, and this is why I always say, like, hey, the metrics might not look good. The defensive numbers, even though they have struggled defensively against some teams that they probably shouldn't have in Long Beach State, and probably that Irvine team as well. You could have played much better defense against. I would say the defense, as brutal as the numbers look for them, I think Javon Hanna can provide a boost for them. Kobe Garland's been incredible, averaging 19 points per game and 4.5 assists per game. Yafet Mundi, the footwork is so good for him, and as a front court piece for this team, he's kind of their true big. He has been really good, and that pick and roll is going to be an ATM machine all year long. Jermaine Washington shooting nearly 40%, or I think he's a little over 40% from three. He's been really good. That defense from him, just kind of getting in everybody's grill has also been impactful. But I think team defense as a whole has got to improve for this team. And, we're going to see. They got New Mexico on Saturday. That's been a matchup now. Two of the last three times it's been really close. And the other time was in the Mountain West tournament, and it was a true road game. I was in the building for it at Thomas and Mack Center. The place was on fire with Lobo fans. So I'm interested to see for San Jose State when they get healthy. Javon Hanna's coming back eventually, and they need him because not only from an offensive and defensive perspective, but from a leadership standpoint as well. Tim Miles talked about, I've never had a newcomer become a team captain, just be voted for team captain, period, out of all my years of coaching. That's how important Javon Hanna is on and off the court for this team. And, I'm just very excited to see the tandem in the backcourt, with Garland, Hanna, and Washington, when all three of those guys get back, of course. And, the Sada and Gonga, another year with him. He's a little bit more hungry. So we'll see how this plays out with the Spartans. But a 5-6 record, I was probably expecting one more win. I was probably expecting them to get the UC Irvine win, and especially the way the Stanford game went, right? Where Stanford comes bombing, hitting all these shots. They shot over 60% in the first half. Irvine was shooting lights out in the first half as well. I mean, San Jose State, just given Stanford's near collapse, probably should have won that game for the Spartans, even though they didn't control the game at all, really. Stanford was in front the whole time. That was probably a game that they should have won, and they didn't get a shot up down two, with the shot clock off less than 20 seconds. So that's where we're at with San Jose State. Got to get healthy, and then, we could kind of get a better grasp on this team. But brutal non-conference schedule. Kind of took care of everybody that they should have, And, we'll see where kind of everything goes from there for Tim Miles' group. The UNLV Rebels have been the ultimate Jekyll and Hyde team. Nothing's really changed. And, of course, their injuries are kind of have to, be implemented to the madness, of course. But when you lose against Tennessee Martin, who's been very good with Jeremy Schulman, they're 8-3. Tennessee State is just a silly loss. I don't care if it's on a neutral, but then you redeem yourself with a win at Stanford and Palo Alto, and then at Memphis as well. This is kind of what we're going to get from UNLV, just this extreme volatility with them every single night, where if they're an underdog, they got a shot. When they're a favorite, probably fade them. I mean, this is the way things are going to go here. And nothing's really changed here from the Kruger era in that aspect. I will say Pastner's got himself a high upside group. Like you kind of see, like Dre Gibbs Lawhorn, the transfer from Illinois. I like that one guy, and I'll pull him up for him. My mind's blanking on his name, but he's an underclassman big. That's looked pretty sharp, for UNLV when he's gotten in there. I believe his name's Jones. But whether it's Howie Fleming or just tons of these guys. I've talked about the Kamani Hamilton foul trouble. Just how kind of all over the place it's been, and how Pastner's just kind of letting them grow, in the process in that regard. Isaac Williamson's played 8 games. He's looked pretty sharp. The guy where we were referring to was Tyron Jones. He's a freshman, 6'9", 180 pounds. That's a guy that's got a whole lot of upside. And I think that's a dude that can be a weapon in conference play for this team. You're probably not going to see Miles Che this year, which obviously downgrades this team a bunch, but Pastner's just got a bunch of like these lengthy guys. They just can't guard. They can all score. They just can't really guard. And I feel like when this team kind of puts it all together, And that's what we've seen. Like when they put it together versus Memphis, when they put it together versus Stanford, this could be a really good group, but then they just kind of have these lousy performances against teams that they should beat, and it just kind of derails everything from what they've done. So that's where we're at with the Rebs. Um, very interested to see them because I think they're going to be like, I don't expect this to change. I think, there's a possibility they lose to Air Force at home this year. Could lose to Fresno or San Jose. And then next thing you know, they're in a shootout versus Utah State on the road. Uh, and they're hitting all their shots. So wouldn't shock me at all there from that team. Uh, we'll see how it all plays out, of course. Very quickly on Air Force, I like the Eli Robinson kid. Like Air Force played a ton of these games at home, and you're like, man, like they're playing Long Island, they're playing Brian Baroni's SIU Edwardsville team, like they're playing a bunch of these teams that they should beat, and they were still losing to them. So when you see that 3-9 record, across the dial there, remember, this is kind of the transition year for Air Force where they're starting like 4 or 5 freshmen. They're starting like 4 freshmen, and the upperclassmen are kind of coming off the bench minus Wesley Selahusky. So they're figuring it out. But when I saw Cam Robinson and I saw Eli Robinson, you're kind of like, okay, maybe in a year or two, when you're in the pipeline once again, they kind of get their feet under them and they understand the physicality of the game. They could kind of get things going, but they will score. I always say this. They will always score a game or two that we don't expect. Kind of didn't really happen last year for the team. But this year, I'm totally expecting it. One game where they kind of just shock the world and, really shock everybody. And they almost did it last year for San Diego State. Wouldn't be shocked if we get kind of, when they score a massive win against the middle tier team in the Mountain West. Very quickly before we get out of here, let's touch on our Mountain West slate tomorrow. Colorado State at Utah State, just an incredible game. Those times are all Pacific Standard, of course, just because that's where we are at right now in the Bay Area. Terrific games. I'm trying to see what we're at here. Yeah, Utah State. Utah State's a sizable 7.5-point favorite, which kind of shocks me a little bit. I think this is going to be a game that comes right down to the wire, quite honestly, especially if Colorado State's able to play at their pace, which is going to be tough to do on the road, of course. How does Farouk Manesh handle this matchup zone? Because, and how do these Colorado State guys deal with it? Because outside of Kyle Jorgensen, he's probably, and even him, he got very limited minutes last year. He is one of the few guys that saw it in person last year. That goes back to my point, with Utah State and their non-conference opponents. That's why they're able to drill everybody, because it's a different animal when you see that defense in person, of course. So Utah State probably wins, but 7.5 I'm seeing right now, that's a little bit steep. Grand Canyon and Wyoming, man, Wyoming is favored at home, which I tend to agree with, just given Grand Canyon struggles right now on the road. I could only that's going to be a very fascinating game. That's going to be another close game, I feel like, or Wyoming is going to get it done at home. But again, this is the big thing right now. Grand Canyon on the road. We'll see what happens. Fresno at UNLV. Now, this has a chance to be something funny here. This is going to be our funny game of the day. Fresno. I think Fresno is going to have a chance to win the game. I really do. We talked about it. Guard play matters, and I'm not discounting UNLV's guard play, but I think people are going to understand how important having 2 seniors that know each other extremely well in Zayon Collins and Jake Heidbreeder, especially got 2 guys that have played in the Mountain West before too prior to this year. I think that's going to be so important for this team. I think Fresno is going to have a chance to win the game. I'm going to go ahead and call the upset. I think Fresno is going to win the game outright in Las Vegas at the Thomas and Mack Center. Should be a fun one. Get interesting. I'm excited to get another data point here on UNLV, just because it's kind of been all over the place with that 4-6 record. San Jose State and New Mexico. Man, San Jose State. I'm seeing that they're a 13.5-point dog. I would say that's a little bit steep. quite honestly, because we've seen with San Jose State, like outside of the Michigan State game, and that's the thing with that Michigan State data point that everyone's going to look at. They were down 30 in the game and really responded well. I think Tim Miles is going to be able to get them to hang in there. This was a very close game last year at the pit, and San Jose State was up double digits the whole game. And I think you're going to kind of get that formula maybe in some of these games where, and we've seen it, especially with Tim Miles and company. And there was tons of these games last year. They weren't able to finish games on the road. And I'm interested to see if that group can overcome that this year with Kobe Garland, because Garland could close you out a game, of course, when he's kind of in takeover mode. I feel like he's kind of got that. I don't want to compare him to Amari Moore, but I feel like he's the scoring guard where when it's time to go, he can go. It might not be at that level that we saw it with Amari Moore when he was Mountain West Player of the Year a few years back, but I feel like he can do it in some spots this year for this San Jose State team. I'm not calling for the upset here. I do think New Mexico is going to win, but I do think it's a single-digit game. San Jose State, even with no Javon Hanna, Yafit Mundi and the Tomislav Bouillon matchup, that's one you have to circle. Adrian Myers, a guy that we failed to talk about for San Jose State as well. I feel like he's going to be your spark plug all year long coming off the bench, where, it's a little bit of a roller coaster ride with him. He might have 2 turnovers in a minute, but he can also have 8 points in a minute. So, that's a player very streaky for San Jose. And, he's got some defensive length to him as well. He's definitely shown off the shot blocking capabilities, at the forward spot. And he dealt with injury. They're kind of still, I think we're kind of still learning about his role with kind of everybody involved right now. But he didn't play 2 years at Mississippi State, and he's playing right now. And you kind of see the upside with the guy of his caliber. Wouldn't be shocked if he makes a massive impact in these Mountain West games this year, whether it's home or on the road. 2 more on the way out. We got Boise State and Nevada. So this game in Reno last year was extremely close, and Javian Buchanan had himself a game-winning steal on Kobe Sanders to win the game, if you recall, and you remember if you watched that game. I think Reno's going to get their revenge here. I think Steve Alford's going to remember that game. I think he's going to show that tape, even though it was with a complete different cast of characters, and he's going to be like, hey, I lost this game last year, and I think that was the game. Nevada's resume was all over the place last year, of course, but that was the game that kind of really suffocated the season for them and really just shut everything down for that group. And it was like I would say in February when that was, I believe. This is the first league game. This is a really good test for Boise with all those guys, a team that's been humming. Since the Maui Invitational, I feel like. And this Nevada team, I don't know if they're going to get Corey Camper Jr. back, but Tayshawn Comer has been really good. The Drew Fielder and Elijah Price matchup is going to be a very fun one. And we're going to see how this whole thing plays out. The bench is going to be massive for this game because Javian Buchanan came off the bench last year, and I think he hung like 20. I know completely different rosters and whatnot, but bench play matters. It's going to really matter in this game, I feel like. But I'm going to go ahead and say Nevada's a home underdog there. I think Nevada's going to win that game. And San Diego State at Arizona. I think this could be a get-up spot for San Diego State. Arizona, I mean, they're number 1 ranked team in the country. I mean, the stock couldn't be higher. Let's see, where's this game at? You got to always check this stuff with everything. It's at the Mortgage Matchup Center in Phoenix, Arizona. So this game is not at Tucson, Arizona. It's going to still be an Arizona crowd, of course. I don't think San Diego State's going to win the game, but I think they can hang around in it. Interested. This is a really good test for the San Diego State team. And they were kind of that game is sandwiched in with, the Air Force game that we had on earlier in the week. And I don't know who they have on deck following this. I think it's San Jose State on December 30th. I think everyone's on Christmas break. I could be wrong there, but Regardless, it's a massive game for San Diego State. We'll see if they pull it off. I mean, nobody thought they could pull off the Houston win last year, and then they did. Oh, they get a non D1 on Monday, December 22nd. So they're all in on this game. Absolutely all in on this game, because then after this one, they don't play until for another 10 days against San Jose State. So yeah, they're going for it this game. Obviously, they beat the number one team in America last year in Houston. I'd say Arizona still wins. I would say this game is kind of hanging around 3 possessions all game. Maybe San Diego State makes the run. Maybe we see a spark out of this team. San Diego State, though, needs a good performance, win or loss, from their players here. Just because their styles, they're still trying to figure out the minutes stuff, I feel like, as well. This might be something that goes on all year. I'm always interested in how Dutcher just plays his minutes. Just because his teams always have so much depth. And last year's team had depth and they were young and he played everybody. But this year, they're older and they have depth. And they got, guys like Jeremiah Oden and Sean Newman Jr., who have been around, but have not really played at a place that expects winning. So very interested to see how that San Diego State team goes over the course of the season. This is like a semi-road game for them, of course. But still, would be one hell of a data point if they win the game. All right. That will do it for us. I said this was going to be a short podcast. It never turns into a short podcast. But look, we had to come on, address the games. Should be a hell of a Saturday. Just across just the college athletics, college football playoff will be going on Saturday. I'll be, of course, tapped into all the college basketball Mountain West games. We'll come back. We'll talk about them. We'll have Rocco Miller. We got him coming on early in the week. We'll be talking college basketball, not only Mountain West, I feel like, but we're going to take a deeper dive into the mid-major conferences, just where the whole sport stands right now. Teams to keep an eye out for. Some flashy mid-majors everybody should be aware of. It's always a fun conversation with Rocco Miller from Bracketeer. So can't wait to talk with him next week. So keep your eyes on that. We're going to have ourselves a college football playoff, quarterfinal preview. Schedule kind of got a little tight this week, so apologies. Couldn't get anything on the round 1 games, but the bottom line is you should have only one good game in the college football playoff. I feel like everything else, like Oklahoma will beat Alabama, and the 2 G5 teams. As much as I love them, and I'm a big fan of the little brothers, and the underdog story. Those teams are going to get roasted and toasted, against the big dogs. So we'll come back. We got ourselves a special guest aligned for that podcast that's coming next week. So we'll be back pumping out content. Was on vacation, just a little bit of an outlier week in the past week or two. So apologies for that, but we'll be back, of course, talking hoops, talking football, as we wind things out and get ready to flip the calendar year to 2026. So as always, like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for everyone that showcases the love here on the channel. Once again, I'm your host, Nick Arias, and be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast.